What's up, everybody? Welcome to Fulfillment Project. Isaac St. John is with us here today, owner of Acorn and Oak. But he would say that doesn't define him. That is merely a piece of his vocation in life. And his main vocation is, Ike, what would you say?
Definitely called to lead that family life, be the head of the house and provide and bring my children closer to Jesus.
Welcome to Fulfillment Project. So happy you're joining us today. If you get something out of this episode, please like and subscribe and share with a friend or 100 friends. Now let's get back to it. So let's start at the beginning, Ike. And I'll just tell the listeners, Ike's been my best friend since childhood. We're talking birth. Our parents were friends, so we were naturally friends from the very beginning. And then Ike and I lived together. Oh gosh, how many years ago now? 10 years ago?
A long
11
time
ago?
yeah.
12 years ago? Wow,
It
feels
was
like
probably
yesterday.
it was probably about 10, 9 or 10.
9 or 10. And if you've been listening to the episode, you've heard me reference Isaac is the one who told me you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. On those train tracks that ran behind Ike's house that I lived with him, that's where all that went down. So I've learned so much from Ike. He was probably one of the first people I knew that loved to read and got me into the love of books, the love of reading, the love of knowledge. And Ike always has a stack of books next to his lazy boy, which is amazing. And Isaac taught me this rule. And Ike, is this still an Isaacism? When you start a book, you finish it. You don't stop halfway through. You don't start another book before you're finished with this book. You start and you go all the way through. Do you still do that, or do you break that rule?
I don't start new books when I'm reading one. I get through the one, but I do have a caveat to it of there have been some books that I've read that are just like, this is zero of interest. And I just stopped and said, I'm done with it and not going back.
So you can be done with the book, put it away, and start a new book. But if you're actively reading, you won't start another book.
Yeah, super rare. There's only been 2 books now that I can remember, period, that I haven't finished.
Yeah. I honestly, that was huge for me because I'm sure a lot of people listening, you do this. You get stoked about the first couple chapters, and then you find a new book that you're excited about. So you start that one, and the first couple chapters grab you. And next thing you know, you're halfway through 5 books, and you don't finish any of them. And
Yeah,
in
don't
order
do
to
it.
get to the concluding thought, you have to read the whole book. So Isaac's rule of reading, I highly recommend it to anyone listening. Start a book and finish it. But one of my favorite books, Love is the Killer app. In that book, he says, if you're reading something that's not for fun, and it's like something you're trying to learn from, but it's not immediately applicable, ditch that book because you will not remember the content you're reading if you don't put it into use regularly or immediately. Agree or disagree?
Totally disagree.
Why?
Not to rock the boat here too much, but
No,
like I
good.
can
Let it
think of
rip, baby.
so many books that I've read that they weren't really ready for me yet. But then as I developed as a person, I still remembered enough of the content that it shaped decisions I was making. So, a great example of it, Tim Ferriss, The 4-Hour Work Week.
Yes.
I'm not working a 4-hour work week. I read that book when I was in large public accounting and resonated with me. And when I left to form my own accounting practice, I had those ideas in my head. And so I went back to it, revisited some things, said, what building blocks can I put in place to make this different? Right. So I caveat all that with I do something also different that a lot of people don't is I reread books all the time.
Yeah. The whole thing, or
So
you read your notes about those books?
both. Sometimes I just run through to like sections that I recall, like I know it's somewhat applicable, so I'll jump back in and read that section. And sometimes I just reread the whole book. So that's maybe a caveat to it of I can read a book, the idea stays with me, and I would tell you just creating the idea grows you as a person. It's great having stuff applicable for you today, but the reality is who you are 5 years from now isn't who you are today. And sometimes you need those ideas to grow into.
Having the ideas to grow into. That's an Isaacism. I'm picking that up. I'm putting that in my bag. I love that. You're kind of changing my mind.
I'll write him a strongly worded letter and tell him he's wrong. Which that's something I got from, I forget who I was reading. It was a book of just write people letters whose books really impact you. Like, what's the worst that can happen? They don't respond, whatever.
Well,
So I
and
have
yeah, and I'm a big fan of writing people notes when I like their stuff or an email, but I find a handwritten letter, if you can find their P.O. box or something, goes a long way to affirm them and keep it up. Like so many people stop doing good things because they don't think it's having an impact. And
yeah.
if people knew it was having an impact, Tim Sanders is the guy. He's the old CIO of Yahoo. He wrote Love is the Killer app. I might write him and say, hey, my buddy Ike challenges your idea, and I'm kind of agreeing with him. Why is he wrong? We'll see.
There
Speaking
you
of
go. See what
speaking
he
of
thinks.
speaking of little provocateurs, provocative things, Ike, you've got this LinkedIn following going right now. I'm not in public accounting. You're currently in private accounting. I'm not there either. I can barely count, but I love following your LinkedIn. You put out
Thanks, man.
the most pithy statements or maybe short stories, short examples, anecdotes. And there's always a very captive hook in there. And you get people talking about it. And I love reading what all these CPAs, CFAs, lawyers, attorneys say about your time. What got you going on that?
Totally accidental, like the following I've developed, right? It wasn't, I didn't go to LinkedIn to develop a following. I went to LinkedIn for my business.
Yeah.
So when I left my large regional firm, I knew I wanted some sort of LinkedIn presence. It's just a way to have the name, have the brand out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I committed to myself, I'm just going to write a post every week. Just random thoughts, random client stories, cool things I'm seeing in tax, because we all know tax is cool. So I started doing that, right? And at first wasn't great, but it started to ramp up. And then it just unlocked. Like my first post that I had 20,000 impressions on, I was like, wow, there's people reading this, right?
Yeah.
And so it was kind of crazy of that. All of a sudden, I did have this significantly larger network, lots of accountants, lots of lawyers, and we're having these discussions and dialogues inside of the comments. It was super cool. It wasn't at all what I was picturing. Like, I was picturing going after new business for it, which it does work for that. I do get new business from LinkedIn. But a lot of what it's given me is just some really cool perspective into how other people do things or how other people respond to some of the problems. And now there's kind of this, I'm kind of part of this weird community of we're all on LinkedIn and we're all helping each other grow our businesses.
That is, does one person come to mind when you think of the craziest person you've interacted through LinkedIn?
Ooh, craziest is an odd word. I'm a huge fan of Geraldine Carter. Check out her podcast. She is specifically a CPA business coach. And when she commented on one of my posts, it was like a I made it moment of like, oh my gosh, Geraldine is reading just the random stuff that I write.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was like really cool. Yeah, that was probably the most cool moment of just
That's
some
why.
random person. But through that, like I've met people who I've known because they have online podcasts or things. It's like they're people who really have influenced me in my career. And I've had calls with them just through being on LinkedIn and posting every week and like, hey, we saw your stuff. Let's talk about this. It's like, whoa, that's so cool.
Yeah. Well,
So
and what's
yeah, it's
crazy
been
is
wild.
people have reached out to me because they know you on LinkedIn. So like I tagged you in that article about you are the average of the five people you spend the most time with. And then I got people reaching out to me who want to meet me because they know I know you and they think so highly of you. And they're like, if you're friends with Isaac, I want to be friends with you. I think you've built up not only your credibility, but your character. And you've always been a man of strong character. And maybe we go there next. But the fact that the people you surround yourself with, other people want to get to know them because they know there's a high chance they're a similar caliber as you because you surround yourself with the best. You cut off the fat and you go right for the kill, man. Every time you're very straightforward in the most loving way. Tell people the way it is. Sometimes that's hard to hear, but people are either attracted to that or they fall away.
Yeah, so there's this saying, not my saying, I'm taking it from someone else, but candor is kindness.
Yeah.
And I love it. And like a lot of times people are just told things that are false because the person telling them wants to save face. And so sometimes you just got to go at it with candor and say like, I'm telling you this because as a person, I love you, but like there's this thing that needs to change.
Whoa. Yeah, man. That is so true. I've got this chapter in a book I'll write one day called The Correction Sandwich. And this is not like a new idea, but you start with love, you go to correction, you end in affirmation. So people know you care about them, but you insert, and I do that with the people I work with specifically. I always have two sets of notes going, and they're chuckling if they're listening. And if you've listened to the podcast before, I've referenced this before. I always have notes for the actual meeting that's going on, and then notes on everyone in the meeting and what they're doing that's really good and what they're doing that's really bad. And then I save those notes in each of their files. And when we meet up for our regular meetings, I bring up the stuff they're doing that's really awesome and the stuff they're doing that could be adjusted for more impact. And
Yeah.
candor, maybe I picked that up from you, Ike, is it's candor is love. No, candor is kindness. That's the beautiful alliteration there.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about the 10-minute manager here.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love from that book, and this is a book I read years ago, it's the idea of try to catch someone doing good, because we focus so much on being critical. A lot of us, especially accountants, guilty as charged, we just see things critically, right? Of like, this
Yeah.
needs to be fixed, this needs to be fixed. And the 10-minute manager, there's a whole premise in that of you got to catch someone doing something good and like appreciate that goodness that they just did, because that positive reinforcement carries so much more weight. And so you're reinforcing good behaviors rather than being critical of negative behaviors. I love that. It stayed with me for years. I'm always trying to catch, and I don't have a team right now, but when I had a team, always trying to catch my team doing good things. So I was like, wow, Joe, you just did amazing. Andy, you did great. Lauren, excellent work on this. You know,
Yeah.
it changes the dynamic.
Not only does it change the dynamic, but people are less scared to make a mistake around you. Therefore, I think you're able to access more of their potential because they are just working without fear of being reprimanded. And a rule I live by with the people I work with is no one gets in trouble. We're all adults here. You have to take risks. And I want you to do things without asking about it. And if you make a mistake, hey, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about the good aspects, what could be better, and then we'll move on. Because the best way to learn is to do. But if you're too scared to act, then you're too scared to grow. So, hey, do it. And if correction is needed or adjustments, it's mostly just little tweaks or adjustments because people's intuition and insight is usually pretty good, which is why I don't like scripts because my script won't work for you and it won't work for you. It's like, that works for me, but you have a different personality. So you need to bring your Ikeness to every situation or whoever you are. And it's like, yeah, and then we can tweak the finer things as we go.
Yeah, it's super important to know. I'm going to just build on your thought there. They're typically small things that we need to be critical of. And sometimes they're important small things. I have an intern who's working with me over the summer. And one of the things I've been doing with him, because we're very critical of ourselves, right?
Oh, yeah.
If I'm doing something, I am probably the harshest critic of myself. And you're probably the same. And so he was getting down about not doing perfect work. So I had to stop and I was like, Colin, you're an intern. Like the expectation for the summer is that you learn and you develop, right? And so I've been doing this exercise with them of we get into the work paper and I put my notes in the work paper and I highlight things that might need to be corrected. And I count all of the things in the work paper. And then I tell them there's 70 things in this work paper and I'm talking to you about 4 mistakes. That means you're hitting way over 90%,
Yeah.
right? So like reframing it so that they have the perspective of there's all these things you did right. Here's just a couple things that we need to take care of. It's been super helpful to him. And I think anyone new in a role, there's that self-doubt, especially if you're growing a ton, which he is. There's a ton of self-doubt and just that reaffirming of you're getting at 80, 90% of the way there. I'm just trying to clean the edges and help push you forward.
Ike, correct me if I'm way off here, but I'm going to be harsh for a minute. If you aren't your greatest critic, then you're a loser. You're making excuses for yourself. You're trying to justify bad behavior. If you're like, I think I agreed with you initially, but I don't think everyone is a great critic. I think of themselves. I think a lot of people are great justifiers of their behavior, of their actions, of their lukewarmness. And I'd say if you're listening to this and you're feeling offended right now, that might be a moment to look in the accountability mirror, look yourself in the eye and say, do I justify my actions or am I positively critical about my actions? And act appropriately.
Yeah, I think I stand corrected. Because as I think about that, definitely worked with some people who were not critical of themselves and would justify just kind of as you laid out. Would I
Come
call them
on, come
losers?
at
Would
me.
I call them losers? Absolutely not. But they don't progress quite as fast as some other people do.
And I say that for shock and awe, just to wake people up. And I agree. I mean, I'm a loser. I'm the biggest loser in my mind, and that's the way I see it. And I always say, I always joke, but there's like a kernel of truth is what makes it funny is I'm never the smartest person in the room. I'm always the dumbest one in the room. So many people have so much more to add than me, which is why my wife told me, hey, you got to have guests on Fulfillment Project because you're not interesting enough to do all this stuff. And it's so true. Every episode.
Humility check. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you.
Amen. Amen. Every show, it's amazing. We're talking, I'm gathering a lot. I'm learning a lot of Ikeisms, writing them down. And then I'll go back to edit and I'll pick up things I didn't get the first time. And then I always listen to it on the day of release to pretend like I'm somebody just like off the streets listening. And I pick up even more. It's amazing. Like when you drop true wisdom, it resonates and it sinks deeper and deeper and deeper. And I, like you, go back and read books over and over again. I have a
Yeah.
system of taking notes in the back so I don't have to reread the whole book. But over time, like people that read scripture and the Bible, you can read the same verse over and over, and at different moments of your life, it hits different. And that's the
Yeah.
same way for me with books that have good truisms and wisdom in it is it hits different based on my position in life right now. I'd highly recommend for people that love books, keep them around. Or if you get the library version, take notes somewhere where you can reflect on that material later on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the power of rereading books. And it's something I love doing. It's you get different things out of them. And you might still kind of know the thing you're reading, but it just strikes you and you find a way to apply it that you hadn't thought of before.
Yeah. So, Ike, there's a lot of people that are listening to this that are coming out of college, thinking about starting their own business. They've got dreams, they've got a passion, they've got the idea. And there's a lot of people that have been working for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They're kind of sick of what they're doing. They've got their $1 million idea. They want to do it. They want to make custom made beach balls that float. Horrible example.
Yeah,
You're
great. We don't have those.
you're a guy that has excelled in every business you've ever worked for. You've been a value add both culturally and to the bottom line with revenue and profit. And you weren't looking to leave. There was just a need that you wanted to fill in the market. You did it. You're having crazy success at Acorn and Oak. What would you
So,
say? What would you say to people that are thinking about starting their own business? What should they be thinking about?
yeah, so thank you for the kind words. And to make it seem like, oh, I knew there was this niche in the market for me, like, not really. To me, it was part of a larger vocation of there were things that I felt needed to be prioritized in my life more than work, like family, right? Like religion, like drawing closer to God. And where I was working, it was really hard because we measured things in 15-minute increments. And so everything in my day was measured in a 15-minute increment.
Yeah.
And you realize how much time you're wasting or how much time is going to other things. And kind of when you do that self audit, it's like, well, my family's not getting many 15-minute increments and my prayer life isn't getting enough 15-minute increments. And to change like the dynamic and still hit the goals that were set forth for me, I started just running the math on. It's like, there's no way I'm going to make the goals the company has for me if I do my faith like I want to do my faith, if I raise my family like I want to raise my family. Those things take time. So for me, it wasn't as much of knowing what the market is out there. I certainly jumped and hoped the market was there, but it was more of like I was really like called to leave. And did I do a lot of due diligence on it? Sure. Did I fight it for a long time? Absolutely. Did I fight it?
Yeah.
But now that I'm gone, it was a great decision to leave. So I say all that just to preface because you made me sound way too knowing. I didn't know. I just trusted to an extent.
Well, thank you for saying that because one thing I've been trying not to do is like idolize guests. Like, someone's Facebook stack or Instagram stack, it's all of their best stuff. And it
Yeah.
seems like, oh, they always live in a bikini on a beach on vacation. And it's like, you can look at you from the outside and you read your CV and it's really impressive. But then when you get to talk to you, it's like, there was a lot of struggle, discipline, pain that went into achieving. And I'm sure you're currently in the middle of a lot of that to make because the business isn't where you want it to be and your life isn't where you want it to
100%.
be. So you're in the middle of that. So talk about
Yeah, well,
leaving or talk about
well,
what you're
let
thinking
me
about.
answer your question first because we haven't actually answered your question.
Yeah.
To those people coming out of school looking to start their own thing, to those people 5, 10 years in, and you're like, I need to make a leap. It's great, but it is a risk, right? And what I was experiencing and what I was seeing in my client base is I would see all these successful clients that I was serving, and I'd be working with them and realize they're not any smarter than me, right? Or they're not smarter than Joe Schmo down the street. Like these are normal people. And so I started saying, why are they so successful? Like, how come this is the way it is? And a lot of it was risk appetite, is they were willing to go and try something that was unknown, right? It took me years to get there. It took me years to make the jump. But part of it is you have to have that appetite for risk. And when you do it, there's rewards that come with taking risk, right? And yes, there is some chance of failure. So don't just blindly jump into risk. Do it in an intelligent way. Like when I left, I made sure that I had a certain amount of runway so that if business was terrible and it was a crash and burn, I knew my family would be okay for a certain amount of time while I was getting my feet under me. The other thing I did when I left is it was just kind of a weird time of year for tax. And I didn't think I would be able to get enough clients to support our monthly expenses, our monthly budget. So the first thing I did, rather than going to look just for clients of Acorn and Oak, is I cold called a whole bunch of small firms, local firms, and told them, I've got 10 years of experience working at this really awesome firm that's a well respected name, doing tax, building teams. Do you need help with your extension deadlines? And you know what? I must have called 50, 60 firms. None of them said yes to me. One of them said maybe. He said, I don't need you right now, but maybe in a month from now, circle back around if you're still looking. And so with that maybe, I showed up at his office. I was like, hey, I'm Isaac. I talked to you on the phone. I'm going to do 2 tax returns for free. If you like my work, let's continue the conversation. If not, you just got 2 tax returns done.
Yeah.
And so taking that maybe and turning it into a yes, like that relationship is what really kind of floated me those first couple months, is because once I finished those first 2 returns to him and he looked at me, he's like, you do really good work. The next thing he said to me is, any hours you want, you can have them.
No
And
way.
so I was giving him a designated amount of hours, which covered my monthly mortgage, which covered healthcare. These are things that you do have to pay for when you go out on your own. You don't think about them so much as a W-2 employee. So I had those covered. And then on the time I wasn't working for him, I was building my brand. I was building the company Acorn and Oak. So it gave me that leeway. So all that to say, yes, taking risks is important, but just know when you're taking the risk, have some steps in place to mitigate it and have a runway so that what you're building has time to build. And maybe it's not quite how I did it, but like there's a lot of creative ways to do that.
Welcome to Fulfillment Project. So happy you're joining us today. If you get something out of this episode, please like and subscribe and share with a friend or 100 friends. Now let's get back to it.
Well, I think the principle I'm drawing out of that, Ike, is you had a vision of what you wanted your business to be, but you were realistic, knowing you had to take steps to get there and doing grunt work hourly for someone else to help facilitate the bridge to your vision was necessary. And you got creative to do that. And I don't know any business owner that didn't have to scrape and claw somewhere along the way or a lot of the way to get to where they want to go. And if and that's, I think, where the risk appetite comes in is, do you want to put yourself out there? Do you want to do it? Is the vision worth it for you? And I talked on a prior podcast that hasn't been released yet, but will be soon. It's like, what passion do you have in your life that's worth suffering for? And that's what you should be pursuing. And I love for you, Acorn and Oak was worth pursuing. It was worth suffering for. It's worth cold calling 50 people, getting 49 no's and one maybe. And then you followed up to turn the maybe into a yes. That's another Ikeism, turning maybes into yeses, helping people see the value. You believe in yourself, but you help other people believe in you because you actually show them what there is to believe in. And a lot of us think so highly of ourselves, and it's like you got to show other people by doing the actual work.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for showing up in person and closing things in person. So not only did I land that kind of first hourly gig in person, but then my first couple clients that I landed, I got them on the phone. They had some interest. They weren't willing to commit. And same thing as, and this is something I love to do. Great Harvest Bakery, if you're in Michigan, a big fan. I pick up a sleeve of their cookies. They're huge, just delicious cookies. I pick up a sleeve of their cookies and I walk into the office of someone who I'm prospecting. It's like, hey, here's some cookies, which in part comes from another book, Influence, and it's called The Click War Effect. As humans, we have some automated responses almost built into us. And one of our automated responses is to be a lot more favorable to someone who's given us gifts. Not that that's 100% why I'm doing it. I'm really using the cookies as an excuse to just get in front of them and let them see I'm a real person and I can solve some of your problems. But on the back end, I'm happy to use the click word response and give you some cookies so that you're favorably inclined towards working with me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Isaac. There are so many tricks like that that line up with human nature. Like, of course, you're going to appreciate someone that gives you a gift. Something I picked up from a book is the mirroring effect, where if you need someone to talk longer because you're trying to collect your thoughts or you're trying to figure out what they're saying, like you don't quite get it, you just repeat the last word they said with an uptone and
Yep.
they will literally keep talking. I remember I read that. I was like, that can't be true. It feels like a trick. I went home. I tried it on my wife. It worked like 5 times in a row. I start laughing and she's like, what are you laughing about? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I just tricked you. And it's amazing. So we have to take advantage of psychology, not take advantage of it in like a negative way where you're taking advantage of the person, but utilize them to serve other people.
Do you remember what book that was?
Do you know what book it was?
Yeah.
What is it? Hit me.
And Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
Yes. And I love, he's got good YouTube shorts as well. Chris Voss rocks, man.
And let me tell you, he's got a piece in his book that talks about something he does, exercise he runs with his master's level class at Harvard. I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. So cool. And then I recently had the opportunity to go back to my alma mater and speak as a guest speaker. I was like, I'm going to try this. So I tried out one of Chris Voss's exercises that he runs with his students, and I got different results. And this is one of those things where, like, I'm seriously considering writing him and being like, dude, these results aren't what you said they would be.
Yeah.
But I was able to deliver the same kind of closing message of like the negotiating and how to think about it to the class because it worked anyway. So funny thing that you brought that book up.
Well, that's one reason I do self-reflection guides after all of my individual posts and articles, and then these longer form conversations is exactly that, Isaac. And I don't know if this is exactly what you were saying, but I really struggle with a book that I read and I love, but I don't quite know how to connect it to my life. I'm like, I see what you've done in your life, but I struggle making the connection to my life. So I try and pull out the key concepts from all these conversations. I'll do it for this one and I'll post it the day after this podcast goes live to help people reflect in their lives how they extrapolate things and make them relevant. Because there's nothing worse than being super fired up. I'll never forget Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad was one of the first books where I read it and I was so fired up. And then I thought, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I want to do this. And one thing he talks about in that book, and it took me, I think, 5 years until the light bulb went off, and I might be able to save some people time by telling you right now what I interpret it to mean is pay yourself first. When he said that, because I listened to the audiobook, I did not understand it. And now I legitimately pay myself first in everything. I pay myself first with my time. I get the first time of my day with my paycheck, alms first fruits to the Lord, and then I pay myself, and then I pay everything else, groceries and whatnot. Physical fitness, I pay myself first. It's so crazy how it took so long for the light bulb to go off. And when it did, is that the way you would interpret it, or would you interpret it a little differently?
It's very similar to how I'd interpret it. Just treating yourself like you're valuable, right?
Yeah.
So yes, it's so different being a business owner, because as a business owner, like I don't have the
How good
promised
does
steady
it, how good
stream, right?
say that?
It feels good, and again, it doesn't feel good because I might have a month that I don't bring home enough of what our budget is for that month.
Yeah.
And so it's like paying yourself first, like on those months when I pay myself first, that's meaningful, right? There's not a lot of cash to be paying myself to be tithing first, but like that's what you need to do because it just kind of keeps things in the right order. What happens if you don't pay yourself first? And maybe I'm tangenting a little too much, but you don't really have any control or mastery over your money. It just goes places. You're not telling your money what to do. Your money's just going out. And then at the end of the month, you sit there and say, what happened? Right? Huge fan of the zero budget, an idea super popular by Dave Ramsey. Lots of people have opinions about Dave Ramsey, but let me just tell you this, regardless of what your opinion is about the man, you should be doing a zero budget
What's
because
that
that's
mean?
you. It's when you take your dollars that come in and you put it on paper and you tell your dollars what they're going to do every month.
Yeah.
I'm going to have X much for groceries. I'm going to have X much for entertainment. I'm going to have X much for gas. You tell your dollars what to do. And some months they might not do exactly that. But unless you have that framework of how you're directing your money is just going to do kind of what it wants. And there's a lot of discipline to you do a $0 budget. You tell it where every dollar's going, and it just helps you work
So that
through
means
your
at the
month.
end, there's $0 left. You make $1,000 in a month. You tell $1,000 where to go. There's zero at the bottom. That's why they call it zero budget.
Yep, exactly right.
So people that listened to my episode on the 5 pillars of fulfillment, I mention in there under the finance piece, money is what I call the first pillar of fulfillment. I talk about creating your emergency fund and then your financial independence fund. And to connect the dots between these two concepts here, and Ike, you can color it in or smack me down if I'm messing something up here. But when I say pay myself first, if my emergency fund isn't full, the first thing I'm going to do in my budget is that emergency fund. If that's funded, the first thing I'm going to do is my financial independence fund. And then comes the other stuff. Because if I don't prioritize those things first, second things second, if second things come first things get forgotten and ignored. So you do the first things first, that'll stack up. One day you'll wake up and realize, oh my gosh, I've achieved something here. If you don't, you'll wake up one day and realize, where did all that money go? You add up. It's like when you look at the interest on your mortgage, feels really small month to month. But after like 10 years, you're like, I've paid the value of my house in interest. You know, it's the same thing when you pay yourself first, except you're the winner in that scenario. And you're like, oh my gosh, it didn't feel like that much. So anyway, I recommend 20 to 30% of each paycheck if you can do it, paying yourself first with. And then if you can't get there, you start with something. I want to go back to when we started talking. You were talking about vocation, and vocation is another pillar that I talked about in my 5 pillars of fulfillment. Vocation. And when I think of that, I think of my job. You seem to have a different twist on it. What does vocation mean to you?
Yeah, so it's not your job. Our jobs
That's
jobs
why
don't define us,
that's why I love you, Isaac. You
right?
push me, baby. Okay, our jobs don't define us.
Our jobs
Maybe.
don't define us. No, they don't. They're just what we do, right? So you are more than your job.
I
You're
believe
this
that. I believe
person,
that. Okay.
and especially as men of faith, like our primary goal in life isn't to get a stellar job. It isn't to have a wonderful company. Why are those important? They're important because they support our actual vocations. They support what we're supposed to be doing as men in our society. Okay.
And what's that?
So the vocation, and everyone has their own vocation and, different. But for me, I'm a married man. My vocation is have my family, bring them closer to Christ, right? So all of these things support that as a vocation, a good job, wages, they support that. And are they part of who I am as an individual? Sure, they're part of who I am, but they don't define me. They're just a piece to this equation of I'm trying to do something bigger and I'm trying to follow the footsteps of Jesus here. And he takes you crazy places, right? I wasn't planning to start Acorn and Oak, but I was sitting there praying about it and I was like, I'm not getting time to pray. I'm not getting time to spend with my family. Like showing up to your kids' baseball games as the exemplary father role, like to me, that's table stakes. Like, yeah, I can show up to their games, but it doesn't really matter in the long run if I miss a couple baseball games. Am I actually present to my children? Am I actually helping them develop as human beings? And that's so much more important. And when you think of your job in that context, if you're a husband, if you're a wife, if you're a single person, you have some different vocations. Maybe you are called to kind of push that envelope a little bit. I know I certainly did as a single man. But when you start having your vocation really drive the conversation, you realize your job, while important, it's really just a support function and it's supporting what you're supposed to be doing.
Okay, so I'm going to push back a little bit because when I think of Isaac, I think of excellence. And I think of excellence because you're excellent at your work. You're a master of your craft. People that would never know you outside of your work know you because of your work, and they know your personality because of your work. And maybe I'm stretching a little bit, but I don't think so. I write about the integrated life, how you are the same person always. You may put different filters on who you are depending on where you are, but that's not a limiting factor. It's just a guide of how you act in certain places. So I'd say you can be defined by your work because you want to work excellently. You want to be a master of whatever you're doing. I don't think I'm disagreeing with you.
I think I kind of disagree with the lens you're using a little bit
Hit me.
in that, yes, I bring myself to my work. I pour myself into work. Work is important. I get a lot of fulfillment through work. Work helps shapes us as individuals. Most of us, like our daily challenges, a lot of them are work based, right? That's where we have the opportunity to grow as people because we're facing stressors. We're trying to deal with different personalities. We have something that goes wrong. Like those are moments that the work is helping you grow as a person, right?
Yeah.
So Isaac comes to work. Isaac's there. Isaac is growing as a person. But does my work really define me? It's giving me opportunities to grow. And maybe we're just picking on the define category a little too much here. But it doesn't matter if I work at Amazon or Google or for Acorn and Oak, my company. That name on the building and where that pay comes from, it doesn't matter. Because it's Isaac coming in and Isaac growing as a person through the experience of work. And yes, part of my vocation is to work, right? That's part of the deal here. It's not my primary vocation. So I guess I'll give you some ground. I don't like saying it defines who you are as a person, but it definitely helps your person. So maybe I'm just being too strict on the word define there.
Well, a couple of things I want to dive into. One is maybe this is my pride speaking, but I always consider myself a mercenary. Like when I show up to a job, my biggest asset is me. So to your point, and I agree with you here, it doesn't matter. You do see some people where they work at Amazon, they're like so proud they work at Amazon and it's all they talk about. Like people that go to some big universities, it's like their identity. And it's like, to me, I am the biggest asset that I bring to work, but that is defined by the 80% of my life that I do spend at work. And I agree, my family, I'm a guy with a family, I've got kids. And in my habit tracker, every day I have spend intentional time with my wife, spend intentional time with my boys. And my goal is to hit that every day. And I don't, but it's a goal. And I just don't buy into your idea that you're kind of downplaying the idea of work in life. And the reality is work is what most of us do for most of the time in life. And that is, I'd say, because that's what Jose Maria Escriva would say, is that's how we sanctify ourselves, is in our work. And we sanctify others through our work and all that stuff.
Yeah. And I agree with that. Like work moves you towards sainthood. Being married moves you towards sainthood. Being single moves you towards sainthood, right? So
Well,
maybe
it can. It
maybe I'll
can.
relent here a little bit.
It doesn't
Right.
100, it
Not
doesn't guarantee
automatically.
it. Yeah. But it can if you have the right focus on it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your focus on the vocation, and something I wanted to wrestle with you because it's always fun to wrestle with you. Your idea of family, and you recognize your priorities in life. Maybe that's the question, is what are your priorities in life? And you prioritized family, and you adjusted your job to meet your family's needs. And maybe I'm trying to justify your position here or make your position make sense to me. If family is your vocation and your work is your work, then to protect your primary vocation, you had to adjust your work, you specifically. So maybe we need to think. I talk in an episode about reflection. Like every successful person I know is very reflective. It's required to think about, where am I? Where do I want to go? How do I get there? And you were reflective of, who do I want to be? Where am I? How do I get there? And you realized in order to get to where you wanted to be, you had to make some changes. And so maybe we're getting mixed up in the definition of
Yeah.
vocation. I don't know.
Yeah. And I fully agree. Work is part of our vocation. We are called to work for the most part. Whether it's a job for someone else or a job for yourself, like there's something you're called to do, is discerning what that is and kind of moving forward with it. And really the first step, and really the first step to me leaving too, was just being honest with yourself, right? Because especially when you have it good, and I'll tell you, I love working at my former employer. There was a lot of financial incentive there. So I had it really good. And it was just, it's important to be honest with yourself about what is important to you. And one of the things I always am asking myself is like, if someone outside of my life looked in, what would they tell me is important to me? And
Whoa.
it's like, where are you spending your time? Like, that's a huge indicator of what's important to you. And so, like, doing a time audit, like, well, did I spend the right time with my family? I don't know. Did I spend the right time at work? I don't know. And so, like, but you have to be honest with yourself in order to be able to progress forward.
I want to call that out because that's an Ikeism I want to extract out of this episode is, if someone were to look at your life, if an alien were to look down at your life and see the whole thing, what would they say are your priorities? And based on what they would say, does that match up with what you want your priorities to be? And if not, how do you bridge that gap? And you may have to make some hard decisions. Like in that lens, you made the hardest decision because you left a really good and really secure thing to take the risk of a lifetime. And by the way, 90% of businesses fail. So the odds were not in your favor.
You are who you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
And so doing an audit of who you're surrounded by is really important. And different people bring different things, right? And it's funny being on my own and kind of helping the CPA down the street. I'm reminding myself of the 5 people because I'm surrounding myself with him a lot of the time now. And we have a really different perspective on our practices, right? I would tell you, like, I'm a premium practice. I'm bringing a premium service, and it's white glove through and through. And he's super blue collar and just like, we're getting the job done. We're going to do it as cheaply as possible for you, which it's not wrong. But it's funny, like, how often we clash just because of our perspectives. And at the same time, how often we rub off on each other is like, some of my prices I've been thinking, oh, maybe I should bring it down. But then I have to remind myself, this is someone who I'm just surrounded with right now. And that's not where I want to go. So like, it's having this impact, and it's hard to just ignore, like, where I was at my prior firm. I'm charging like half of what I used to charge there, right? So I came from this environment of, we're charging this significant amount, to my own environment where I'm charging, I would tell you, is a fair and a good, reasonable amount for the type of service that you're getting from me. And then I'm working with someone who's charging very, very little. And just that osmosis is kind of weighing on, oh, should I bring my prices down? I'm constantly reminding myself, like, it's just because I'm in the room with him right now. Like, if I'm in the room with someone I used to work with, my prices are too low.
You know what I love about that, Ike, is a lot of the feedback I got after my article on the people you surround yourself with, which was inspired by you, ironically, is that sometimes you do find yourself surrounded by people you wouldn't choose. And I'm not saying that's you, but in general, you can be in a position. I've certainly been in those positions where for work or other organizations, you are with these people. And to identify that and call it out in your mind, at least, and like draw the line in the sand where they do things I don't like. I do not want to be like that. And that serves as motivation for you to go the other way, actually. So it still can motivate you in the right way, but you have to recognize it for what it is, put a name on it, and then allow it to motivate you in the right way. Is that fair? Is that a good extrapolation of there?
Yeah, and I'm going to take us one step further. Of when I'm
Go,
kind of
baby.
using this,
Take us, like, take us there.
when I'm using this concept of you're the five people, a lot of times I'm meaning that on a much deeper level of who are the five people that you're really choosing is this person's in my life. And it's true, it's who's surrounded you generally, but like the guy I work with down the street isn't really part of my inner Isaac circle.
Yeah.
He's a stepping stone to where I'm going. And I am surrounded consistently by him right now. So it is rubbing off on me. But at the end of the day, he's not one of my five of like the people who are actually influencing my life. To your point, like he kind of is because I'm seeing him a lot. But it's also knowing that delineation, as you just pointed out, of what does this person kind of mean to me in this journey? Is it someone I'm trying to emulate, or is it someone I'm not trying to be?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And it is important that you intentionally, another Ikeism I want to pick up here is you are unintentionally surrounded by people that you don't have a choice over, but you can choose and should choose. And I actually haven't done this in an intentional way like this. I'm going to do it in my journal over the next week is who are the five people that I want to surround myself with? Because I subconsciously surround myself with the type of people I want to surround myself with. But calling it out, putting a name on it and saying, hey, because of life, these happen to be the people I actually spend the most time with. Who do I want to place in there? And maybe I have to go out of my way. I have to make an extra effort to get those people in my life. I think that's a really good point that you draw out, Ike. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Alex Hermosi, who I'm not actually a huge Hermosi fan. So
I just emailed him the
don't let
other
me
day.
sing his praises
Yeah.
too much. He's got this thing that he said recently about, I'm blanking on exactly what he said, but it was essentially like if your friends have a ton of time to be hanging out with you, you need to get different friends who have bigger goals and are pushing the envelope. And the point he was making is like, yeah, like people who are actually kind of moving in that business world, they don't have the same availability that maybe your friends who aren't movers and shakers do. And I always take things he said with a grain of salt, but I also think it kind of rings true. My best friends and the people who I want influencing my life and are influencing my life, I don't get to see them with the frequency that I necessarily want. But that's good because we're all kind of pushing forward the way we want. And it just creates a little bit of not compromise, but you just can't have them there constantly if you're going to be accomplishing the things you want to
Yeah.
accomplish.
Whenever I talk to you, Ike, I'm on the road to a meeting and you're in between meetings, or I leave a voicemail and you text me, hey, walking into a meeting, or like my buddy Dom that inspired me to start this whole process. When I reach out to him, most of his responses to me, and I've picked this up as a technique, it's really good. He responds in voice memos because how many times have you not called someone because you don't have the time for a conversation? But a voice memo is almost as good as a phone call. You get to hear the voice, you get to share the whole thought. It's certainly a lot more richer than a text message, but it takes like 30 seconds to shoot one of those off. And then you can have that conversation throughout the course of a couple hours between events, between meetings. And I love that little voice memo hack. I've started to incorporate that into my life. It's easier to stay in touch with the people I want to stay in touch with because I don't have to say, oh, I don't have time for 30 minutes to call Ike right now. I shoot you a voice memo about my thought. You get back to me when you can.
Yeah, I hate voicemails, but like a texted voice memo that just feels different. So I don't know. Maybe we should try it.
Let's try. Let's try. All right. We're coming up on time here, Ike. I want to ask you one last thing. The 5 pillars of fulfillment. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? So the 5 pillars: money, health, community, values, and vocation. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? And the whole point
Yeah,
is
I
without
mean,
any
it's.
one of these things, you cannot find fulfillment.
I mean, if I'm picking from that, like I'm taking money out of the equation, in all honesty. And I think of monks and people who live a life of poverty. Like
Yeah.
they're choosing to do that.
They're choosing to do
And
that
maybe you
because
could,
you have
maybe,
chosen to give them the money. Money matters.
maybe, and the absence of money, I guess, is a choice too. But kind of that concept, I would pause for a second and just say, like, it's not necessarily the accumulation of money, right? Money is a tool. Money is just simply a tool, and it's this construct that's fake. Money is fake. It's completely made up, right? Why does one of our pieces of paper equal 20 and one of them equal 10? It's
Yeah.
completely arbitrary. It's the exact same paper. It's the exact same ink. They cost the same, right? So like money is just this construct that's made up that we use to trade,
Yeah.
right? It just
Well,
makes trade easier.
and I would say money is the things that buy fulfillment insofar as it will become the goods, it will become the time, it will become the education. That is, so I agree with you. Money is just a substitute for things that have yet to be purchased. And the goal of money is not accumulation. I think I'm drawing a line in the sand on that one. I said it, I wrote it a couple weeks ago in an article. I said it, and it's like speaking something out or writing it down. It like makes it more real for some reason. And so it's been on my mind a lot because it's the most controversial thing I think I've told myself in a while. And I think I'm standing by it. Money is not for accumulation.
I don't disagree with that. There's like obviously levels of accumulation, right? Take care of your needs, take care of your vocations. And maybe if your vocation's poverty, again, it changes the dynamic that we're talking about money here.
Right on. Well, and there is a need for future protection of your vocation. So in your situation with family, well, you can't spend down to zero because what if you get sick? What if you can't work? What if your business goes under? So I'm not saying,
but here's
yeah, hit me, go.
here's the crazy thing that's in my head of just like God provides, right? All of this construct of I'm saving this money to be able to have some control. I could die tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if my bank account was zero, like God provides. And so that's where it's just kind of hard for me to be like, wow, it's one of these pillars. Like it certainly has impact.
Well, so I might say this. If you die with zero in your bank account, you, in your construct of believing you're going to get judged, I wonder if God would judge you for not having insurance to provide for your family.
Not being a good steward to your family. Hey,
I mean, is that a thing?
I mean, you are called to be a steward of your resources.
Yeah.
So I kind of agree.
All right. So let's take money out of it. Community, values, vocation, health.
Yeah.
Can you find fulfillment without any of those other ones?
No, I think those are super important. And we see that especially now, like community is being so much more focused on globally, really. But we've kind of hit this realization at the dawn of social media that people aren't doing community like they used to. And there's this void, there's this absence of real human connection. And we see that coming up again and again in our society today. And yes, you can find communities online, like the community that I somehow established on LinkedIn. It's a great community. It gives me a ton of joy and fulfillment. And I still don't know why you people follow me, but thank you. But yeah, so like community is important in that in person and that connection. It is very important, I think. And we're seeing that and the ripples of not having community in our society today.
Yeah. Well, and circling back to money, something this has been evolving in my mind since you said it, and I'm agreeing more with you the more I think about it, is when people think of money, they think of a lot of money. And what I mean when I say money as a pillar is money is a prerequisite to life. You don't have to live in a mansion, but you have to live in a house. And you're either paying a mortgage on that house, or you're buying the house outright, or you're paying rent on that house. That requires money. It can be a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom place for your 10 children, but you still need the money to do that. So I do want to say that I agree with what I think you're saying. The amount of money isn't as important as money is. And maybe that's something for people to reflect on, is how much is enough? Because a lot of people think about money as accumulation. And a lot of people get pounded by materialism, and they never think about, wait, what is the purpose of my life? And how much money do I actually need? And what do I need to be fulfilled? So you got to put that in the pot. You got to mix it around and then figure out the money thing.
Yeah. Yeah, which kind of what you said there makes me think of the FIRE movement. So being super frugal, financially independent so that you can retire rich. And so what allows people to do is they cut their expenses to very, very small in order to achieve their financial independence. And like that's one way to do it. Is it the best way? I don't know, but like it is about how you're using the resources that you're given and working with.
Right on. And as many people as there are in the world are as many ways as there are to achieve fulfillment. There isn't one way. Like there's many ways because there's many personalities, many people have different backgrounds. And like some people will naturally accumulate a lot because they have a lot of skills and that will naturally, and they serve a lot of people and that brings a lot of money. That's not a bad thing. It doesn't guarantee fulfillment. So you still have to be having these conversations. Other people have more simple tastes and they can find fulfillment in that. And that is perfect. You don't have to be complicated to find fulfillment. And sometimes I think it is harder to find fulfillment the more complicated things get. Simplify.
Dude, eye of the needle, man. Eye of the needle.
Eye of the needle. Isaac, you get the last word today. Where can people find you? How can people support you?
Yeah, come follow me on LinkedIn. I post random thoughts there all the time. Would love to see you popping up in the comments and sharing. So it's Isaac St. John, and you can search Acorn and Oak PLLC. That's how you can find me. And I'm on there almost more than I should be, except I monitor it. So I respond pretty frequently.
And Ike, we may have some people listening that could be potential customers for yours. Who is your ideal customer?
Yeah, so if you have a business that you're running, your owner of business, you got some complexity coming through on your 1040. Like I do a lot in the rental real estate world. I do a lot in the franchise world. And if you have a business, like we might be a good fit.
Beautiful. Everyone, thanks for tuning in to Fulfillment Project. Isaac St. John, thank you for coming on, my brother. Have a great day.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to Fulfillment Project. If you got something out of this episode, please share it with a friend or 100 friends. You can subscribe to Fulfillment Project on Substack, Spotify, YouTube, and Apple. Please rate us 5 stars and leave a comment. See you all next time.